Hello, I'm Kate, and welcome to Perfect Party in a Box. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive right into today's topic: how to save your marriage and stop a divorce. Tips for saving your marriage. Today I'm going to talk about how to prevent separation and divorce and hopefully save your marriage. This is a huge topic. We're going to cover a lot, so hang on and watch this entire video because I'm going to teach things that most couples will never know about creating a loving marriage relationship. Who is this video for? It is for someone whose spouse has announced that they are no longer happy in the relationship. You may have heard things like, "I'm not happy anymore," "I don't love you," or "I'm leaving." This is an extremely difficult and heartbreaking situation to be in. I know you feel hopeless at this moment, but I want you to know that there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and with guidance, help, and a will not to quit, it is possible to turn your marriage around. I have seen it happen before, and you can do it too. A broken marriage is a difficult road. Things will likely get worse before they get better, and it takes a lot of devotion and will on your part to make it better. If you watch this video and follow my advice, you will have the best possible chance to rebuild your marriage into the marriage you and your spouse deserve. Before we talk about what to do to save your marriage, we need to talk about what not to do. These damaging mistakes are very common. Many of you are in a situation where your spouse isn't willing to work on the marriage, but that's okay, and it's more important for you not to make these common mistakes than to worry about how to build a new, happier marriage relationship. You may already know some of this stuff, but it's important to remind yourself of what not to do so you don't damage your marriage further. These tips will make an immediate impact when followed carefully. Tip number 1: don't initiate needless conflict. When trying to fix a broken marriage, you are likely feeling desperate, and there is a good chance that things can spiral very quickly out of control. You know what I mean. You're thinking, if I could just talk to my spouse about our problems, find the common ground of our marriage, it will fix itself and improve. This is rarely the case, and not how you can expect it to happen. Communication is vital in rebuilding a marriage, but what your marriage does not need is another argument. Even if your spouse just said something antagonizing, or they want to bring up a touchy subject, in that moment, do your best to avoid the coming conflict politely. I'm not telling you to ignore your spouse or their concerns, but if you want to make sure that the discussion doesn't end up in a fight, in this situation, just say something like, "I know this is a real concern of yours right now, and I want to resolve it, but can we discuss it later?" Just say something polite to defer the argument. You want to be as non-confrontational as possible, at least until you learn the skills to manage your arguments better. Tip number 2: avoid begging, pleading, or being highly emotional. Remember this especially in public. When emotions are high, people tend to do or say things that they will regret. I know you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes your spouse will say things that make you feel angry, upset, or sad, but you need to do your best to control your emotions at these difficult times. When you show negative emotions, you will only make matters worse and likely help you sign those divorce papers even sooner. So remain calm and you can live to fight another day. Tip number 3: don't make drastic changes in your life. If your marriage is in trouble, it can affect the rest of your life entirely, but don't let it. Don't let your work or school or your health or your nutrition slide. You must try your best to retain a sense of normalcy whenever you can. If you start tanking your life, your marriage will suffer even further. No one wants a spouse who is angry or depressed or whose life is in ruins. Show that you are strong and confident. Show the world that nothing will faze you and that you will not only seem more attractive to your spouse, but you will avoid doing further damage to yourself and your own life. Tip number 4: stop nagging. This is similar to tip 1, and you definitely want to avoid an argument whenever possible. It is normal to be annoyed by your spouse every once in a while, but when your marriage is in trouble, small confrontations can easily blow up, and the last thing you or your marriage needs is another pointless argument. When your spouse does something that gets on your nerves, hold in that annoyance. Now is the time to start working on fixing your marriage on your own. Tip number 5, stop being negative. This one might sound like a bunch of BS, but having a positive attitude makes a huge difference in your life, not just in your marriage. It's been proven that positive thinking has the power to reduce stress, lower depression, and increase resiliency. Plus, it makes you a more attractive person to be around. This is also scientifically proven. In times of distress, like being in a failing marriage, people tend to think pessimistically. And why wouldn't they? The love of their life wants to leave and is saying hurtful things, and it is easy to take all of that to heart. Instead of internalizing the negativity, change your focus. Every marriage goes through ups and downs. It's the strong couples that have positive attitudes about handling conflict that succeed. This isn't meant to be a complete list of marital mistakes to avoid, but it is a list of key habits to avoid. Now that we've covered what not to do, let's talk about some of the things to do to repair your marriage. This video won't cover every concern or issue. After all, the list of possible marital problems is probably endless. But there are a few core issues that marriages will face that we will talk about today. It is almost guaranteed that at some point you and your spouse will disagree, and that disagreement will grow into a full-blown argument. These kinds of arguments, when they occur often enough, can start to rip marriages apart. Arguments aren't always preventable, so it's important to know how to handle a serious argument, as well as how to prevent one in the first place. Arguments are normal and healthy. You can't completely eliminate them. In fact, sometimes they can actually be productive, if you know how to handle it well, and bring the two of you closer together. So let's talk about how to handle those arguments. Tip number 1, you're always right. Let go of the desire to always be right. You're always right, I hear you. But sometimes people have such an overwhelming desire to always be right, and that is not helpful in a marriage. No one person is always right, and letting go of this idea is a great first step in defusing an argument. When the two of you are in a huge fight, there is no winner. You will both lose because no one is getting their way, and feelings are getting hurt. Even if you think that you have won a fight, the satisfaction is fleeting, and knowing that you have hurt your spouse makes the win feel hollow and pointless. Learning to let go of being right can be a real test for some people. Here's a tip to try. The next time you are in an argument with someone who is not your spouse, just try to bite your tongue and admit that the other person is right, even if you don't feel that way. It takes practice, just like any new skill. So just try it out until it becomes easier. If you let go of the desire to be right, you will reduce the frequency of your arguments and be well on your way to improving your relationship. Tip number 2, take breaks during an argument. You can do this during an argument by telling your spouse that you want to take a moment to cool off before the two of you continue the discussion. Don't leave and ignore them. Just say it calmly and politely that you need a moment to vent some steam. This contradicts a popular belief that the secret to a good marriage is never to go to bed angry. Sometimes it is better to go to bed and sleep on it and leave an argument unresolved than to just continue to harm each other and the relationship. Sometimes that is just what the argument needs. The next day you may realize the issue wasn't such a big deal, and you may allow it to blow over, or you may have fresh eyes on what needs to be said and be able to say it more calmly and effectively. Tip number 3, conduct arguments with respect. I hope I don't need to say this, but I will anyway. You cannot resort to name-calling during an argument. Start using the word I instead of you at the start of your sentences in the argument. For example, if you hate being late whenever the two of you go out together, instead of saying, "You're always the reason we're late," say, "I would like it if we could try our best to leave a little earlier." Think about how differently those two statements make you feel. One definitely feels more respectful than the other. Making small shifts like this can radically change the way the two of you communicate. Showing respect to your spouse in an argument may help them to begin to treat you more respectfully as well. Tip number 4, humor used carefully can be a powerful ally. This one is tricky, but very useful. Injecting a well-timed humorous moment into an argument can diffuse an argument quickly. For example, instead of, "You're always the reason we're late," try, "Honey, if we were late any more often, we'd have to take a pregnancy test." I know that was awful. I'm sorry, but you get it. Humor, used at the right moment, can send a message without you looking like a complete jerk. So now we've talked a bit about how to handle arguments. But what if your marriage is really in trouble and your spouse is already ready to leave? How can you convince them to give you another chance? This is a difficult situation, and there are a number of solutions to this problem. But here are a few rules of how to react when your spouse says, "I want a divorce." Rule number 1, don't panic. We are hardwired to feel threatened when something we value is being taken away from us, but hitting the panic button when trying to win back your spouse is going to make things worse, and acting erratically will just push your spouse further away. It will feel difficult when all you want to do is cry and scream, but do it anyway. Rule number 2, buy time. When your spouse announces that they are leaving, there is nothing that you can do or say at that moment to change their mind. The best thing to do is buy as much time as you can. Why? Well, it allows your spouse some time to cool down. It is likely that making this announcement was difficult and emotional, and this is not the time to berate them. If you have already been begging and pleading for them to stay, stop. Emotional outbursts do not help you come up with a plan for saving your marriage. Rule number 3, validate their concerns. Show your spouse that you understand the serious issues in the marriage and that you are willing to try. You cannot talk them out of it, but let them know you are going to give the marriage a fair shot. They may not agree, but you need to let them know you are going to put in the extra effort it will take to fix the issues. Rule number 4, give your spouse space. This will be difficult, but for the next few days, give your spouse some room to breathe. Give them time to let their emotions settle. They need space, and you probably do too. Rule 2, buying time, is the most essential to saving your marriage because it gives you a chance to build and implement a plan to save it. Another issue that marriages face that I want to touch on briefly is complacency. Complacency is a deadly disease to even the best of marriages when left to run rampant. Complacency can lead to divorce in just a matter of months. This happens all too often. Between managing money, work, stress, kids, and just life in general, making the effort to spend quality time with your spouse can be easily overlooked. It is understandable once in a while. After all, life can easily throw you a curveball. But to keep a marriage alive and healthy, we simply cannot allow ourselves to take for granted the most important person and relationship in our life. Here are a few simple actions you can take right now to avoid complacency and its destructive forces. Tip number 1, have meaningful conversations regularly. Have an open and honest and respectful conversation on a regular basis. This can help overcome many relationship problems. Don't get defensive, but try to learn from the other person. Ask questions. Ask about topics you may not have explored before. This may seem difficult, but you can even brainstorm ideas of questions to ask together. Then, take the time to ask them. Tip number 2, be a little selfish in the right way. This might sound weird, but mostly I'm just reminding you to take care of yourself. Go to the gym, eat healthy, focus on making yourself a better person. Don't do this for your spouse, but for yourself. Find your own reasons. Tip number 3, show love and affection. Saying I love you isn't always enough. You need to show how much you love your spouse as well. Simple gestures like showing excitement whenever you see your spouse, holding hands, making eye contact, flirting, all keep the spark alive. This might be difficult if you are in a rough spot in your marriage, but keep it in mind as you move forward, no matter where your relationship is right now. Tip number 4, go on adventures together. It's easy to plan a regular date night. You've heard this advice a million times before, but date nights can get complacent and feel like a routine as well. You need to plan an adventure, something out of the ordinary. It doesn't need to be expensive or over the top, but do use your imagination. Plan a picnic on a mountaintop, rent ATVs, and spend a day together riding. Whatever it is, don't let it be ordinary. Depending on your relationship, you may not be ready for adventures yet, but keep it in mind for the future to prevent complacency from creeping in when things are better. Tip number 5, remember the element of surprise and use it. Routine equals boring, which equals the death of a relationship, especially when it comes to sex, conversation, or date night. The element of surprise is a great way to get out of the routine and stir up positive emotions. Let your imagination go wild and surprise your spouse with something they would never expect, and do it often. There was a lot here today. I hope you took some notes and learned something new. Go implement one of these tools in your marriage today and watch it change for the better. Thanks for stopping by today. If you enjoyed this video and tips, please click the like button below. To make sure you never miss a video, click on the subscribe button. See you in the next video.